Hi everyone, my name's Henry Hyde, and some of you may recognise me as the person who made a series of YouTube videos about my experiences being diagnosed with prostate cancer and undergoing the treatment for that prostate cancer, and then also talking about some of the after effects, long-term after effects and that kind of thing. And today I'm here to report that I am still cancer free. Thank you very much indeed. I have my next PSA, what's known as a prostate specific antigen test, in a couple of months' time. But hopefully that's going to show that I'm still cancer free. But what I am still receiving, no more radiotherapy, thank goodness. What I am still receiving is ongoing hormone treatment in the form of Prostap 3 injections every 3 months. They create what's called a deposit injection, which means to say that they stick it in part of your body and it sits there under your skin and slowly releases over the course of the next 3 months. I'm receiving that and will continue to receive that probably for another couple of years. The idea being that that suppresses your testosterone, and prostate cancer feeds on testosterone, so they suppress that to make sure that the prostate cancer doesn't come back. That has a number of dramatic effects. In my videos about the cancer itself, I mentioned that effectively what the Prostap is, it's a form of chemical castration. So as a guy, you have no sexual thoughts or feelings whatsoever, which if you're a normal kind of guy is kind of weird, and it's one of the things that one has to just kind of deal with. You get used to it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be happy about it, but it is just becomes a fact of life for a time. I have a friend who's just emerged from the other side of having the hormone therapy, and he reports that if you're lucky, normal functions return thereafter, which is something to look forward to, I suppose. But I thought I'd talk to you today about the longer term kind of mental health effects that the cancer treatment has had, continues to have, and the fact that in my case at least a whole lot of other stuff has bubbled up which has had to be dealt with, which means that as of last week I started having actual counselling sessions from a properly qualified therapist. The kind of counselling I'm having is called humanistic counselling, ongoing humanistic counselling, and we'll talk a bit about that in due course. But I think it's important to talk about mental health in any case, regardless of whether it's, in my case, it's resulted largely, I think, from the, having gone through cancer, a life-threatening illness, and the ongoing hormone treatment that has brought all kinds of other stuff bubbling to the surface, and the kind of situation I've been in that has triggered the need for proper professional counselling. So let me start by saying that for those of you who might not be familiar with the earlier videos, one of the effects of the hormone treatment that I've been receiving has been one of the first effects was hot flushes. Actually, you get the same kind of hot flushes that a menopausal woman gets. Fortunately, I've been prescribed some tablets that have pretty much 100% got rid of the hot flushes. Hallelujah, because they were horrible. But what the other major effect, as far as I'm concerned, is that this chemical that I'm got coursing around my veins has heightened my emotional response to just about everything, and I in some of the early videos I was also already noticing that I would suddenly get emotional for no apparent reason. I'd suddenly kind of burst into tears at the slightest provocation, or if I felt angry about something, that would also make me cry. It wouldn't make me kind of testosterone fueled fury. I would actually find getting angry upsetting. Now this is hard enough to deal with, and is something that the Macmillan Cancer Organisation, the cancer charity, and Prostate Cancer UK, that charity, in their literature and the information they provide and their forums and blogs and so forth, they all mention that these are side effects that you should expect, that the kind of emotional, an excessively emotional response to stimuli that normally would be like water off a duck's back for you, that is something that you need to expect. But I think the key thing that I want to talk about today is the fact that what also happened is, right from the get-go, some of the experiences that I had as part of even the diagnosis process triggered stuff from my distant past, which was completely unexpected. Now, I'm not going to go into vivid detail about stuff because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to embarrass myself, and I don't want to implicate anyone else in anything that I've been experiencing. This is my stuff I'm talking about. It's no one else's fault. This is my stuff, and this is just stuff I've been living through. But I hope that by talking about this stuff, my example might at the very least encourage you to get the help you need if you're experiencing mental health difficulties. And the first thing is, it's very hard to admit to yourself. I know this, particularly if you're kind of a macho guy. It's very hard to admit to yourself that you actually have got mental health difficulties, that is what you're experiencing. Particularly because our culture, very British culture, and I'm talking from a British point of view, is very much stiff upper lip, don't make a fuss, pull yourself together. All that kind of language that's used around mental health that's basically desperately unhelpful. And the first thing you need to do in order to set yourself on the road to recovery is to admit that you've got a problem. If you're an alcoholic, the first thing you have to admit is, yeah, I'm drinking all the time. That's not right. If you're addicted to cigarettes, yeah, hang on a minute. I've just lit a cigarette. Whose is that cigarette still burning in the ashtray? Oh my God, it's my cigarette. That's what happened to me, actually. I was a 50-a-day smoker for a time, and that's one of the things that gave me a shock, was like, oh my goodness, I've lit a fresh cigarette, but there's already one burning in the ashtray. The same is true for mental health. The first thing you have to realize is that my responses to stuff are not what I would consider to be normal, not perhaps what anyone would consider to be normal. I have a problem. One of the crucial things for me was realizing that the problems that I was experiencing, the stuff that was bubbling up to the surface, was affecting the people I love. And I'm deeply unhappy about that. I could almost take the fact if what I was living through and experiencing sent me into the pit of despair and gloom. But what I'm not prepared to do is drag anyone else down with me. And I'm going to talk more about that in due course. So what happened was, let me take you back quite a few months now to, crikey, what would it have been? September, October of 2019. Yes, as long ago as that. When I was first diagnosed, or just before I was diagnosed actually, I had to undergo what's called a biopsy. A biopsy is where they take a tissue sample to examine it under the microscope and see if there are nasty cancerous cells growing in those tissue samples. And in my case, of course, yes, the outcome was they did. They found that not only did I have cancerous cells, but there were lots of them and they were growing very fast. I had what's known as a Gleason score of 9, which is like 9 out of 10. Sounds great, doesn't it? 9 out of 10. Not in this case. Totally the opposite. 9 out of 10 is bad, like potentially lethal bad. But before I'd even been given the news that that's what my score was and that therefore I was in danger of death, I had to undergo a biopsy. I'd had a what was laughingly called a digital examination by one of my local doctors, which basically means that kind of digital, folks, right? Nothing to do with electronics. That discovered that I did have an enlarged prostate, so off I went to a local hospital to have a biopsy. And this biopsy, well, your prostate's in a very awkward place. It's not like, yeah, we're going to do a biopsy on your thumb, Mr. Hyde. Oh, there it is. No, because of where your prostate is, the only way in is via the back entrance. Yes. So I had a team of guys, highly professional. Now, let me make it clear that the team that performed the biopsy, highly professional, highly considerate, made sure that the anaesthetic had all worked properly, that I was, aware of what they were doing and when they were going to do it. But it basically meant, dropping your trousers and lying down on a bench on your side whilst there was a team of 3 guys behind me with video cameras and goodness knows what, disappearing up my rear entrance, taking samples with what I can only describe looked like a giant nail gun. It was very weird, a very strange and uncomfortable experience. And when I emerged from that test, it was clear that I had been more or less traumatized by it. Not because of pain or discomfort or anything like that, but something deeper was at work here. And a very good friend of mine, a lovely friend, who has some experience of psychology, was very concerned about how I looked when I emerged from there. White and shaking, I think, would probably be not putting too fine a point on it. And she very kindly spent some time with me discussing what had happened and trying to explore why I had reacted the way that I had. As I say, she's got fairly considerable experience in the fields of psychology. And it turned out that what had happened, this biopsy had triggered memories of something that had happened in my early childhood when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old. I can't remember precisely, but it would have been in the late 1960s. That's how old I am, right? And it triggered memories of an episode when I had actually been diagnosed with suspected appendicitis and taken into a children's hospital. And back in those days, it's a big drafty ward with lines of those kind of metal beds on either side of the wall with a lot of very sick children in there. And I was taken away from my mother and father, put in this ward and put into the care, and I'll use that word in inverted commas, of a very strict matronly nurse and doctors and other nurses on this children's ward back in the days when children were supposed to be seen but not heard and supposed to comply with everything that they were told to do, and their feelings were not taken into account. And basically the experience I had was terrifying. First time in my life I'd been taken away, separated from my mother and father, other than when they went to work or whatever, but certainly in those circumstances where they went away and I was not in my own bed and I was in strange surroundings with these people who were very almost kind of military in their efficiency. And I was taken into various rooms, you can probably imagine, and given x-rays and examinations and stuff as a little boy. Very shy little boy. I mean, that's the other thing I need to point out. I was a very shy little boy and I wasn't used to being physically examined, certainly not those parts of my body. And after an x-ray, I think it became clear to them that actually what it was not appendicitis at all. I got very severe constipation for whatever reason. Don't ask me. Sorry if this is making you squirm, but I think the story is important. And that night, after I'd had the x-rays and so forth, the curtains were drawn around the bed around me, and this very stern matron and another nurse came in and stripped my bottom half and inserted suppositories up my rear end, obviously to clear what they discovered was the problem. I was given no explanation of what was going on. I was given no explanation of what would happen once these suppositories had been administered. You can probably guess already. But they were administered not gently, I think that's fair to say. And that night, in the middle of the night, I have no idea what time it was, but obviously those suppositories suddenly took effect. No one had pointed out to me where the nearest toilets were. No one had explained to me, oh yes, in the middle of the night, Henry, frankly, you're going to probably shit yourself. I'll keep the account of that night that much. But let's just say it was terrifying. And I had more or less forgotten this incident until that biopsy was administered in the hospital, diagnosing me with cancer. And it wasn't until afterwards, in discussion with my friend, that it dawned on me that this experience in my adult life had triggered memories that I'd suppressed for 50 years, basically, that I'd had as a child. Where, I think it's probably fair to say that something like that would not be allowed to happen now. The fact that my mother and father had been shooed away, get out of here, leave it to the men in white coats and the women in aprons. But back then, people did not question authority. No. And my poor parents, I don't think they could have had any idea of what was about to happen to me. But obviously, it was a very bad experience, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But this incident, having the biopsy more recently, 18 months ago, triggered memories of that. And that was the start of a whole load of stuff that's bubbled to the surface in the last 18 months. Because obviously once I got diagnosed with cancer, I was given that diagnosis, which was, that was bad enough, right? Hey, you've got cancer and it's really bad and it's growing fast, you might die. Oh, and because then COVID interrupted, my scheduled date to begin my radiotherapy was set back. And there were all kinds of other concerns about if and when I was going to get the treatment I needed. That was bad enough. But the main thing was that as soon as I was diagnosed, I was given and prescribed, first of all, tablets and then these injections of this hormone suppressant, testosterone suppressant, called Prostat 3. And I think it's fair to say that over the course of the duration of my treatment and subsequently, since the radiotherapy finished, successfully, thank goodness, and subsequently, it's been the mental health challenges that have outweighed the physical challenges of actually undergoing that treatment. I've mentioned before in my videos that the radiotherapy itself was painless. The staff who administered the radiotherapy were absolutely fantastic, highly professional, made me feel looked after, cared for. But that finished on the 4th of August last year. So it's been some months now since that finished. After effects, which I've again talked about in the video, deeply unpleasant after effects, which fortunately have now more or less abated. But yes, it's been the effects of the prostate, the unleashing of my past life, if you like, that has led to the greatest challenges that I have faced. And this is where I want to kind of flag something up, because my very good friend has been tremendously helpful. I can't tell you how helpful. I mean, ever since that, helping me to come to terms with that first episode of, wow, what's this that's been dredged up from my past that's troubled me so much, and a number of other things that in discussion with her, we unearthed and addressed. And I've learnt a huge amount. Oh my goodness me, I've learnt a huge amount about psychology, certain aspects of psychiatry, and so forth, about how the mind works over the course of the last 18 months. Thanks to that friend and another one, who've introduced me, quite almost deep into the subject of psychology, in order to help me understand my own mind and its workings and what's going on and why I'm experiencing some of these very strange things that have bubbled up from my past, issues to do with my childhood, my upbringing, the way I've just experienced life, and there's no other way of putting it, the scars that it's left behind. We all get used to our own story, the story of our life, and what we tend to do is just, stuff happens, and some of it we deal with there and then. If it's a big thing like someone dies or whatever, we deal with it there and then by grieving or whatever. But there's an awful lot that happens as well that we kind of, I can't deal with this now, and I'm just going to, open that cupboard. Here's this thing that's happened to me. I can't really cope with at the moment. I can't spare the time or effort or energy to deal with it right now. So I'm just going to, there's a cupboard. I'm going to get this thing, shove it in that cupboard, close the door, I'll deal with it later. Of course, what happens? We don't deal with it later. It sits in that cupboard, if you're lucky, just gathering dust, more often than not festering, because you haven't dealt with it. And this is one of the things that I've certainly learnt big time in the last few months, is that there was stuff that, had I been better equipped mentally, had I had the right friends, had I had the right advice, if at that time the right research had been done, because an awful lot of the latest psychological techniques, psychiatric techniques, are relatively recent. And so stuff that happened to me back in the 60s, 70s, even early 80s, I didn't have the tools to address, if that makes sense to you. I'm picking up the jargon of psychology, by the way. Tools, doing the work. There's nothing to do with earning a living. It's got to do with actually addressing the issues you're facing and processing them in order to kind of reintegrate them back into your life in a more positive way, a calm way. And also doing the work, which is literally in the same way as you would sit down and, I'm going to spend an hour doing my accounts, sitting down for an hour, thinking about the stuff that's happened to you and addressing it head on, not running away from this stuff anymore, which I now know is absolutely vital. And my dear friends have helped me to understand that, and now I am in a much, much better place, much, much more capable of dealing with that kind of stuff. But what we discovered in the course of discussions between my friend and I is, wow, my life has been a Pandora's box. At first we thought, maybe there's one or two things from my past that perhaps we should, you could help me with. And it turned out that there was an enormous amount of stuff that just came bubbling to the surface. Stuff that I had forgotten about or gone into denial about, or just, had shoved in that cupboard because I didn't know any better. And of course, sometimes it was the mores of the time, and as I said at the beginning, we British are very much, give it a rub, boy, you'll be fine. Don't make a fuss. That's a common one. Don't make a fuss. You're a bloke. Suck it up. Come on, tough it out. That kind of denial does not work. And I'm sure some of you watching this already know that to be true. Some of you may have already undergone therapy or whatever and been faced with this kind of thing yourself and realizing that, just running away from it didn't help. So that's the kind of first thing. And the other thing that I need to point out is because I'm incredibly lucky. I've got some wonderful friends. I've got thousands of acquaintances because of my kind of what I do for a living, and in my own tiny little niche, I'm a fairly well-known figure, so that I'm known by literally thousands of people, most of whom will probably be quite shocked to see this video and me confessing that not all is well at Hyde Towers, or not all has been well. But the point is, it's great if you've got friends. If you've got good friends, you're incredibly lucky. They are precious. Hang on to them. Ply them with champagne and caviar at regular intervals. Make sure that they know that you appreciate your friends. But I have to relate that there is a limit. And none of us can tell what that limit is until it arrives for you. There's a limit to even the best friends, even those most able or apparently able to kind of cope with you kind of opening up and revealing all your stuff. There's a limit to friendship. And particularly when you have a friend who's, maybe quite knowledgeable about psychology and mental health and that kind of stuff. There comes a point where there's a danger of something emerging that's called a dual relationship, which is where your friend is also your therapist, effectively. And that can be very, very unfortunate, because the difference between having a professional therapist who you go to see once or twice a week or twice a month or whatever it happens to be, is that a professional therapist / counsellor or psychiatrist maintains a strict distance psychologically, emotionally, between yourself and themselves, in order to facilitate the fact that you can go in to see that therapist at the appointed time, for 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it happens to be, offload absolutely everything, just pour yourself out to them, even if what you've got to say and reveal is ugly and horrible, and a lot of it is, even someone who thinks that they've had a fairly average life, well, as I've discovered, crikey, stuff can bubble to the surface that's pretty horrible, upsetting, at the very least upsetting. And the problem is that if the person you're relating all this to is your friend, they can be upset by it as well. They're trying to remain objective in order to help you, but the danger is that they can feel involved in some way. If for no other reason than, oh my God, this is my dear friend who's relating this stuff to me, that's all very upsetting. I can see that it's very, very upsetting to him. And the fact that it's upsetting to him is upsetting to me. And particularly when, as in my case, it was like every conversation I was having with my friend, wow, we just uncover more and more stuff. And at some point, even the best friend in the world is going to go, oh my goodness me, I can't cope with this anymore. And that can lead to undue pressure on the friendship. And obviously, the point of, me as the patient, if you like, it upsetting to me that I've upset that person. And so if you've got a good friend, even if they're, they might be a qualified psychiatrist or something, but the main thing is that, and under normal circumstances, it probably would be that person might say, oh look, well, it's not good for me and you to kind of discuss this stuff, but I know where you can get help. Let me help you find the help you need. And that's the route you need to take, because otherwise you can inadvertently end up ruining a friendship, putting lots of undue pressure on a friendship in what's known as a dual relationship, where you've got friend acting as therapist or therapist acting as friend. It's like it's like oil and water. They shouldn't mix. And this is important because if you want, you need to be aware that however good your mates are, however lovely they are, however supportive they are, however much they care about you, however much they love you, they are not, they can be comforting. Oh gosh, that's really sad and upsetting for you. Oh yeah, they're there. Great, to be supportive in that kind of standard way. That's lovely, but they aren't necessarily the people best positioned or even best equipped to be the ones who actually try and help you solve your problems. And so let me kind of come back and to what I was saying about getting professional help. And I have now found a professional therapist with whom I'm going to have weekly sessions. I had my first session last week, and it's quite clear from even the one session that the dynamic is completely different. That it is very, very different. It's quite odd, actually, I've got to say. It's the first time experiencing talking to someone who's a complete stranger, who has no axe to grind, is not involved with me emotionally at all, and just listens. And in fact, because the style of counselling that I'm having is called humanistic counselling, that style is very much about listen, and occasionally ask a few questions, and then maybe make a suggestion or some kind of interjection. But it's very... it's not like the kind of discussions you have with a friend, where it's not a conversation in the normal way. It's not a normal kind of bantery exchange of this and that, and the therapist is very, very circumspect about making any kind of intervention until they've got to know you properly. And in this particular style of therapy, it's very much about getting you to open up and getting you, where possible, to answer your own questions and come up with your own solutions. Very interesting. Different styles of psychiatry and therapy, your mileage may differ. There's all kinds. There's transactional analysis, there's Gestalt, that's Freudian, there's Jungian, there's goodness me, what I've learnt about the different styles of psychotherapy and so forth, and counselling that you can get nowadays. Wow, it's astonishing. So this is the other thing, the kind of therapy you might need may be completely different from the kind of therapy that I need. And in fact, the kind of therapy you need may change over time. The fact that you know, and it's really important that you kind of create a bond of some kind with your therapist, and that's not a friendship bond necessarily. It's a working relationship, because yes, you're there, you're paying this person to help sort you out, and you're going to end up having to do work, right, together and alone. I mean, it's the other thing. Once you've had a session with the therapist, they will give you kind of homework to do, so that when you go to the next session, it's already kind of decided, right, we're going to be talking about that, and go from there, you know. Some people may only need a very few sessions, half a dozen. I think I'm going to need quite a few more than that. So again, another issue when it comes to finding the right therapy is cost. Because if you're lucky, certainly via the National Health Service here in the UK, it is possible for the NHS, your GP or whoever, to refer you to a locally based mental health service that might be able to offer you some free counselling sessions. Now, in my experience, because I sought this out kind of towards the end of last year, I was referred to a local organisation, wellbeing organisation, where I had an interview that lasted an hour and a quarter with a very lovely man who I think would have been the perfect counsellor for me. And he said, unfortunately, owing to COVID and the pandemic, I'd love to be able to offer you an ongoing series of counselling sessions, but I can't. The most I could offer is half a dozen. It wouldn't be me doing it. It might have to be online, and that's the most we could offer, is 6. And I can tell you're going to need more than 6. Which is like, oh. So they weren't able to offer it for me, and for a while this is another thing that triggered my friend trying to say, well, that's a real shame. Okay, you happy for us to kind of try and do the work together? And it was all done with the best of intentions. What I now realise at that point, I should have said, look, no, don't. We shouldn't put ourselves and our friendship at risk in this way. We didn't know it was going to be at risk. What I'll do is I'll go away and try and find an affordable counsellor. But hey, you live and learn. Nobody's fault. But I'm saying this to make you aware that there are going to be times when it's a struggle to find the help you need. You might not find the help you need immediately. You might not find the counsellor you need immediately. I'm going to put, for UK residents at least, I don't know what the situation may be in the US or mainland Europe or whatever. I'm going to put a couple of web addresses at the end of this video to help you find a counsellor in your local area. Because there are resources out there. One of them I think is called counsellors.org that I'm going to refer you to, where if you're in the UK you can put in your postcode and hit return, and it will come up with a list of all the therapists, counsellors in your local postcode area, or within 5, 10, 20 miles or whatever, so that they're accessible to you. I mean, obviously at the moment during the pandemic, I'm recording this in mid-February 2021, almost the only opportunities you're going to have are going to be online counselling anyway, over Zoom or Skype or one of those things. So actually where you're located doesn't really matter. And also, gosh, on Facebook and Instagram, we're being bombarded with adverts for online mental health services, BetterHelp and others, who are providing online counselling wherever you are in the world. So I'm like here. I am situated in Hove in Sussex. I might end up talking to someone in California or South Africa. It's an international thing. And to be honest, as long as you get a counsellor with whom you're at ease and you're happy to open up to, that doesn't matter. Also, for example, with the BetterHelp thing and a number of the online things that are being advertised, they're offering counselling not just by voice or by Zoom, actually seeing a counsellor. You can just get counselling by text. Now, that's not satisfactory for me, but then I'm not 19. I'm 59, not 19. I like to be able to see who I'm communicating with. I like to see and look in the eye of the person to whom I'm revealing all my innermost, darkest secrets. But your mileage may vary. And if you find that kind of thing suits you, a couple of text exchanges a day, and you're prepared for the fact that they're going to charge you for that, go for it. Go for it. As I say, I suppose I'm old-fashioned and I like to be able to look in the eye. I'd like to be able to shake the hand of the person who's helping me. But I think it's fair to say that one accepts that under current strange circumstances, online Zoom meetings are something that we're all getting used to. So it doesn't bother me as much as it might have done, even a couple of years ago. But it's ironic that the person with whom I have my therapy sessions actually lives about half a mile away. There you go. That's life under the pandemic. So there's this. I've given you this warning that you can't you mustn't rely on your friends to be your therapist. It might seem a good idea at the time. You may get on and famously with and love your friends to bits. That's actually part of the problem, because as was my experience, that by uncovering stuff from my past, that was upsetting to my friend as well as to me, and that's extremely unfortunate, and I urge you not to make the same mistake that I did. And I don't blame my friend in the slightest, not in the slightest. It was one of these things that neither of us could have foreseen. I had no idea how much stuff was going to come bubbling up from my past, and they certainly didn't. Right? But this is the trouble. It is a Pandora's box, and sometimes, or a can of worms, if you like, that once you start, oh, what's in there? Oh, you might not have any idea what's going to emerge. And it's not fair on someone you care about to subject them to that. This is what a professional therapist is for. In terms of in terms of the kind of therapy that you might need, as I've kind of banded around a few words there, and I've got a link to there's a site called Healthline, which covers the whole gamut of different kind of mental health approaches. The National Health Service has a really good kind of mental health section, and I'll provide a link to that website as well. Some of you might not have as many issues as I do, and I sincerely hope you don't. I sincerely hope that perhaps you're watching this video because you've been feeling a bit down because of the pandemic. You're feeling under pressure because the money's tight in the pandemic. You're feeling under pressure because your job has been furloughed and you don't know if you're going to have a job to go back to. You're feeling under pressure because you can't get together with the people you love and care about, other than for a walk at 2 meters distance or whatever. You can't give them a hug. You can't travel to the places that you love to travel to. You can't go on holiday. You're locked inside the house. The shops are all shut. You're having to do all your shopping online. So just all those normal everyday interactions that you have just walking down the street and, I'll pop in the shop and buy a pint of milk or whatever, are no longer open to you at the moment. And we shouldn't underestimate the detrimental effect that the pandemic and prolonged lockdown is having on all of us. And of course the news from around the world ranges from not great to absolutely dismal. The one ray of hope we've got is there are now vaccines, and people are getting the vaccines. I hope I'm going to get my vaccine soon. My partner had hers just recently. So that gives us a ray of hope, but they're still saying that even with the vaccine, even if we all get vaccinated, this is not the end of the story, sadly, because pandemic, new variants, I don't know. We're in mid-February now, and there's talk that maybe lockdown will be eased back to where we were with various tiers in May or something. depending on when you watch this video, you'll have you might be, if you're watching it straight after I've made this, you'll be going, yeah, this was like 6 months down the line. If you watch the video, you might be, oh yeah, I remember that, what he was talking about. Fortunately, it's all kind of eased off now. Who knows? This is vast speculation on my part. But even if it's just kind of the effects of the pandemic on your life and your mental health, this is not to be sniffed at. This is serious stuff. And in my case, the pandemic and all its difficulties kind of forms the backdrop. It's an additional thing. In my case, hey, cancer! That scared the living bejesus out of me. Fortunately, I've survived it, and it was successfully treated by radiotherapy. But I'm still on the hormone therapy, which feeds into the background of the pandemic and everything I've been through, and as I say, has kind of multiplied the effect of my own difficulties. And I think, for a lot of you, there's a thing called cognitive behavioural therapy that many of you may have heard of, which is offered very often to people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Which is a way of helping you to restore your self-esteem, restore your interest in the things you love doing and stuff. It can be very, very successful for a large number of people. And, there are books out there, there are websites out there that talk about cognitive behavioural therapy, and usually that comes with kind of exercises to do, whereby incrementally you kind of restore your self-esteem and your ability to cope with everyday life. And I think it's fair to say for many people, highly recommended. I mean, obviously this is where put a thing at the beginning of the show as well to say, I am not a qualified therapist. I am not a medical practitioner. I am not a trained doctor. I am not a trained counsellor. So I'm just mentioning these things from my own personal experience, where I think it might be helpful you to, flag up to you that these kind of things exist. So, from my point of view, I think there's not a great deal more that I can say at this point, other than provide you with some information about where to go looking for potential sources of relief for your own mental health problems. So I just kind of want to sum up by repeating what I said earlier, which is own up to the fact that you've got problems. Okay? Do not, however hard it is, and it is hard, I'm not going to pretend it isn't. There's an awful lot of stuff that swims around in our heads that we'd really rather not confront, that we'd really rather run away from, that we'd really rather not tell anyone else about, or admit to anyone else that there's anything wrong with us at all. But just carrying on, pretending that there's nothing wrong, is the worst thing you can do. Really is. Tell someone about it. In the same way as you thought, oh, I've got a strange lump in my chest. For God's sake, tell someone about it. If you're having repeatedly bad dreams, if you're finding yourself inexplicably bursting into tears about stuff, if you're finding the pressure all too much, if you're feeling anxiety about even, stepping outside the front door, if you're feeling profoundly lonely, and a lot of people are in lockdown, don't hide it. Okay? Tell someone about it. Tell your friend. Tell your general practitioner. Tell someone. Tell a relative. Okay? And from that point on, it might just be, oh, come on, cheer up, let's go and do something jolly and you'll feel better. And sometimes it might be, because a lot of us have been shut indoors or whatever, going for a walk around the block. Whether the weather's good or bad, just that fresh air, and if you're lucky, a bit of sunshine, a bit of daylight. My goodness me, a bit of daylight. that can help. Forming good habits, getting some exercise. Actually, one of the things that I've been doing in recent months, since about November, is I've been on a regular daily exercise and weight loss regime, which, thank goodness, I've lost now 34 pounds in weight, which is what was kind of 15, 16 kilos thereabouts. I've been on a diet, Dr. Michael Mosley's 800 diet, actually, 800 calories a day, which may sound like nothing at all, but I got used to it quite quickly. So I've lost a load of weight, and that's helped me to transform myself physically, which also helps give me the incentive to think that, well, if I can do that to my body, I can do stuff about what's going on in here as well. Okay? So exercise, regular exercise can help. Getting into good regular habits, getting up at the same time of day, going to bed at the same time of day, all these things that would seem like, well, it's pandemic, lockdown, why bother? Actually, those kind of things count for a lot when everything else in the world seems to be going to pieces. Having a routine can be incredibly helpful for you. There's a brilliant book by a chap called James Clear called Atomic Habits, which I may have recommended at some point in my previous videos. Brilliant book, pointing out that it can be dangerous for us to set goals that are just bonkers, and we set ourselves up to fail. That just makes us feel more miserable. Like with my weight loss, pardon me for bashing my own microphone. With my weight loss, I've only got a very vague goal of, I think I used to be that sort of weight when I was in my 20s. But basically, every day I do the exercises, I eat the food, and without having a focused specific goal, just the habit of doing these things every day, I've lost more weight than I've ever lost before, by miles. I'm now down to, what was the scale? It was 16 stone 4. I started at 18 stone 10 back in November. I can't remember the last time I was down to nearly 16 stone. Decades ago. But I didn't have, this has not been a goal. It's an ongoing process. I'm going to see how far it takes me, because otherwise, yes, I've hit my target weight, and then you kind of relax and it all starts going to pot again. So I've got this ongoing movable feast of a goal of, I just want to get down to the best, healthiest body weight I can get to at age 59. And I've got no set date when that's going to happen. Which is also just as well, because when you're on a diet and stuff, you do yo-yo to a certain extent, because your body hits a certain, what's called a set point, kind of resets itself, adjusts how many calories it needs and that kind of thing. And, your weight can yo-yo a bit. And it'd be very easy to get disheartened if it was like, if you were so fixated, but I must get to, 17 stone or whatever it was. You'd give up. You have to accept the fact that the way I do it is, every time I get on the scales, I'm just recording the data, like a scientific experiment. That's it. All right, so that's the weight today. Great, okay. Don't get upset about it. I've seen my weight fluctuate 2 or 3 pounds either way at certain points, but then it starts coming down again. So that kind of thing can be very important. Don't set whatever it is, whether it's weight loss or learning Spanish or whatever it is, don't set yourself impossible goals, because that will just make your mental health worse when you don't hit your own targets. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. It counts for a lot, believe me. But yes, get the help. And yes, it can be hard finding the help. I'm not going to say it's easy. Finding the right help, finding the right person to help you. And, I can tell you, just looking at this website with all the counsellors on, the range of price tags for the kind of counselling you get and who gives it to you is pretty astonishing. My counsellor is costing me £40 per session. There we are. It's completely open. I think there are a few I saw who are a little bit cheaper than that, but not much. I think most of the time, unless you manage to get it free, I think most counselling, you're kind of talking about £30 an hour and up. And when I say up, whoa, there are some people who charge a great deal more than that, more than £100 an hour kind of rate. Because some of them qualified in Harley Street and got all sorts of letters after their name and are in demand. I think that's the other thing. Because of the pandemic, therapists are in demand at the moment. I kind of wish I'd trained as a therapist. I wouldn't have some of the financial pressures I've got. Who knows? I may still train as a therapist. I've been learning so much about psychology in recent months. I may yet train as a therapist. Why not? I like the idea of being able to help people out of the kind of shtick that I've got. But find the help you need, look around, take your time, don't beat yourself up. I'm going to make a couple of book recommendations at the end of the video that have helped me enormously. One I'll mention straight off, Derren Brown, the magician. You know him? You know, makes tall buildings disappear. That kind of thing. Kind of the UK's David Blaine kind of guy, if you're not from the UK. An amazing guy, incredibly talented, hugely intelligent, wrote a book that was published, I think it was last year or the year before, called Happy, which sounds so trite, but it isn't. I urge you to read it. There's actually an abridged version called something like A Little Book of Happy. Again, I'll put the title. It's one of these things, you can get it on Kindle for a couple of pounds. Absolutely worth it. Based on the ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism, which I now realise, goodness me, I completely misunderstood what Stoicism is actually about. A lot of us, a lot of people, they hear Stoicism, oh, that's the British, isn't it? Stiff upper lip and, wait till you see the whites of their eyes, chaps, and, oh, it's only a flesh wound. Right? Wrong. That's kind of a major distortion of what Stoicism's actually about. Stoicism's basically about learning to cope with the shit that life throws at you and remain calm and composed and, yes, happy, content in your life. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Cannot recommend that book highly enough. And there's another book that I only discovered recently thanks to a recommendation from a very, very good friend who's, funnily enough, training to be a counsellor. A book called Self-Compassion by, I think the author's name is Dr. Kristin Neff. I got the audiobook version first, which has a fabulous narrator, absolutely wonderful woman, beautifully narrated audiobook, but I now also got the paperback because again there's kind of exercises to do in the book, and I find it easier to kind of have a book open in front of me than trying to listen over and over to what the exercises are. This book on self-compassion, again, if you're bloke, get over yourself. It's not all floaty woo-woo, not in the slightest. There are elements of kind of Buddhist philosophy in it, which are to do with self-love, self-knowledge, self-esteem, but actually, above all, self-compassion. Because one of the things I've realised is, ever since I can remember, partly because of the way I was brought up, I am murderously, and I use that word deliberately, self-critical. Massively self-critical. I am so, or have been for many, many years, for 30, 40 years, brutally self-critical. Again, partly to do with my upbringing, partly to do with the school I went to, the kind of standards of excellence that were always expected, the kind of criticism you'd get if you failed to get another A in your homework or whatever. Oh my God, I only got a B+, I'm a total failure. you know, listening to it objectively, it's ridiculous, isn't it? But I'm sure some of you listening to this, watching this, will recognise that, won't you? Oh yes, or in your job, you know, you only sold £95,000 worth of stuff this month as opposed to £100,000. You're a failure. We don't want to know you. In fact, we might sack you. Certainly keep you on the edge of your seat as to whether you're going to have a job next month. Puh. Yeah, I used to work for insurance companies just like that in sales. Absolutely brutal. You know, and the man of the month, you've got to be the man of the month who brings in the most, you know, policies of life insurance or mortgages or whatever it is. Oh yes, and so if you're the person who brought in just one fewer, you're a failure. It all goes so deep. At the time you're like, oh, whatever, you know, I don't like him anyway. But it all goes way deep. You know, and I was someone who as a kid at school was relatively academically and sportingly successful. You know, I did better than 99% of other kids, you know, but I wasn't right at the top. Occasionally I was, but I was made to feel like, oh, if I wasn't repeatedly at the top, oh, how disappointing. Oh, you've let us down, Henry. Seriously, that shit goes deep. That goes deep. And I'm pretty certain there's a whole bunch of you out there will recognise that kind of situation. Whether it's at work or the expectations of your parents or at school, you know. And what happens is, after a while, you don't need those people to criticise you anymore because you get really, really good at criticising yourself. In fact, as the book Self-Compassion points out, you know, you get really good at getting the criticism in first, you know. Oh yes, I am my own worst critic, and I'm kind of proud of that. Not good. That's the kind of stuff you need to unravel and learn to give yourself compassion as if you were your own best friend. You know, you have to learn to comfort yourself, which is a journey I'm just kind of embarking on, really. You know, I'm not an expert on this, but I've realised, gosh, yeah, that's what's been missing. That's what's been missing largely from my life, where I've set myself impossible standards, and therefore, guess what? Can't always live up to them, which leads to kind of breakdown, leads to self-loathing. And when you're doing that, it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you too, and it especially affects the people you care about the most, because they hate seeing you like that. You know, my partner Annie, bless her heart, she's an absolute rock. And I now realise over the years how distressing it's been for her seeing me beat myself up repeatedly. Again, this is probably going to come as a shock to a lot of the people who know me from my other world, who think, oh, Henry, yes, big extrovert, you know, happy-go-lucky, bon vivant. Yeah, I'm a really good actor, folks. It's not that stuff is untrue, and I can do that stuff, and I've not had to do it so much, you know, in lockdown, because none of us have been out and about, so I've not been in a position where I've had to kind of play that part. But the fact is, when I do that, largely I am playing a part. It is a facet of my personality that I'm able to project. And it's not a false thing, you know, it's genuine. You know, if I'm extrovert and out meeting and greeting people, I enjoy doing that. And I you know, if I say to people or give them the impression that I like them or whatever, that is not a lie, it's completely true. It's just that going out there and doing that stuff in public, I find completely draining. Sometimes totally shattering. And I need to retreat. You know, that because, yes, I've got this access to this kind of extrovert persona, but part of me is very introverted. Part of me wonders what the hell I'm doing most of the time. And again, there's going to be people watching this. I know, recognise that's a bit of nod of, oh yeah, I do that. I know a lot of, quite well-known people in the writing and publishing world who, wow, the persona they project is amazing. But behind closed doors, they're very different people. They're much more private people. They're people who may be carrying around issues of their own, that they're not going to wear their dirty laundry in public. I'm kind of weird in that way, because my feelings, like with the cancer videos, I want to talk about this stuff, to encourage you to talk about this stuff. I think it's really important that, if nothing else, if there's a role I can fulfill, it's like the pathfinder for even if it's just for a few people, like with the cancer videos, where people got in contact and said, oh, thank you so much for making those videos. I found it really helpful, and actually, yes, I've been diagnosed, or I'm about to be diagnosed, or I'm undergoing treatment myself. Thank you so much for airing this publicly, because that's empowered me to be able to talk about it. And that's, if nothing else, if this little video has no other effect, maybe it can be that you, my friends, if you're feeling miserable, depressed, anxious, upset, just admit it to yourself first, admit it to those around you, and I'll tell you, you'll be amazed the response you get. You might think, oh God, it's so embarrassing, I daren't tell anyone else. Actually, the fact is, so many people out there, the majority, are incredibly supportive. Oh my goodness me. And oh, I didn't realise. Oh my goodness me, gosh, you kept that well hidden. We thought you were fine. Oh, so sorry to hear you're not. Is there anything we can do? And to your best friends as well. And remember, this is the thing, probably your best friends will go, oh God, do you want to talk about it? And the answer, which I hope is sunk in by now, is up to a point. Happy to talk about it up to a point. But the biggest service you can do me, my dear friend, is help me find the right person to talk to. Someone who actually I don't know personally. Someone from whom I have a distance, an emotional distance, so that I can just let all this stuff out without fear of misinterpretation or being concerned that what I'm talking about is upsetting to them, and not putting pressure on the people who are my friends. So I have been fiddling with this piece of Blu Tack, right? If you hear the occasional thump, sometimes it's me bashing my microphone, sometimes it's my little bit of comfort Blu Tack, which, notice how obsessive I've rolled into a perfect cylinder, because that's the kind of guy I am. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I hope you found this video not too squirmingly uncomfortable. I hope you found it useful. And if you are the kind of person, or one of those people who is suffering, first of all, as I say, admit to yourself that you're suffering. Give yourself some compassion, as if you had your best friend next to you. Give yourself some compassion for the fact that you're suffering. And go and find the right help. And there's so many websites out there now that can guide you. There are hundreds of books. A quick put mental health into Amazon. Good grief. Then it's just a matter of check how many stars it's got, how many hundreds or thousands of people have said, I found this incredibly useful. Not just 5 or 10 people. The best books are the best books for a reason. Beware of some of the books, because sometimes the writer's got a bit of a hidden agenda. Like I stumbled across a couple where, oh yes, they want to lead you to God, or something like that. I've got a friend who I talked about this to, and yeah, they're quite religious, and even they said, yeah, that's not what I need. What I need is not God trying to fix me. I need a therapist trying to fix me. Right? But that's up to you. Right? If you get comfort from that kind of thing, so be it. But I just want good science, right? Good solid science behind the advice I'm being given. Okay? But go find your own path. And good luck. I really, really hope that you're able to find what you need. And I'll be doing another video at some point in the future, hopefully giving you an update about the healing that I've been able to find as a result of the therapy I'm getting, and also because of the work I'm doing myself, on myself. I've got no pretense that this is an overnight success thing. It's not, because I know how much stuff there is for me to deal with. But over the coming weeks and months, working at it myself and with the help of my therapist and with the support, yes, of my lovely friends, I'm going to get there. I'm going to mend myself. And I truly hope that that's something you'll be able to do too. Thanks for watching.